What if I told you that everything you've been praying for, working toward, and desperately seeking has already been given? Not will be given tomorrow. Not might be given if you're good enough, but already complete, already finished, already done. Most of us spend our entire lives climbing a mountain only to discover there was never a mountain to climb. We've been standing at the summit all along, simply unaware of where we are. Today, we're going to explore the most radical, life-transforming statement ever uttered. 3 simple words that change everything. It is finished. What happens when you truly believe it is finished? Let us begin in silence. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of fullness. The silence in which we discover that striving ends and being begins. The great reversal. Most spiritual seekers spend years, even lifetimes, trying to get something. We want to obtain peace. We work to achieve health. We struggle to demonstrate supply. We pray for harmony to come into our lives. But this very approach reveals that we have not yet understood the nature of spiritual truth. When Christ uttered, "It is finished," from the cross, this was not merely the completion of a personal mission. It was the revelation of an eternal truth. The spiritual universe is already complete, not becoming complete, not moving toward completeness, but finished, whole and perfect, now and forever. What happens when you truly believe this? A revolution occurs in consciousness. The end of striving first, all mental. Struggling ceases. You see, most of what we call prayer is actually a form of begging, asking God to do something that hasn't yet been done, to fix something that appears broken, to supply something that seems missing. But this kind of prayer comes from the belief that God's work is incomplete, that there are gaps in divine creation. When you truly believe it is finished, prayer transforms entirely. It is no longer petition but recognition. You are not asking for what you need. You are acknowledging what already is. In the inner sanctuary of your being, you become still and listen. And in that listening, you hear the truth. All that the Father has is already yours. The kingdom is already within. The work is complete. This doesn't mean you become passive. Rather, you discover a different kind of action. Action that flows from wholeness rather than lack. From being rather than becoming, living in the invisible realm. Second, you begin to live from the invisible rather than the visible. The material world shows us lack, disease, conflict, and limitation. And if we accept these appearances as ultimate reality, we must constantly work to fix them, change them, improve them. It is an endless battle. But when you accept that it is finished, you realize that these appearances are not the final word. Behind the visible world of form is an invisible realm of spiritual reality, and in that realm, all is already complete, harmonious, and whole. You stop trying to heal the body and instead recognize the spiritual body that is forever perfect. You stop trying to demonstrate supply and instead rest in the awareness of infinite abundance already present. You stop trying to find peace and discover the peace that has always been at the center of your being. This is not denying problems. It is seeing through them to what is real and eternal, the dissolution of time. Third, the tyranny of time releases you. So much of our anxiety comes from living in time, worrying about the future, regretting the past, feeling that we are running out of time to accomplish what we must accomplish. But "it is finished" is an eternal statement. It exists outside of time. In the spiritual now, there is no tomorrow when things will be better, no yesterday that must be overcome. There is only the eternal present in which all of God's work is complete. When you touch this truth, you find yourself free from the pressure of time. You no longer live in the tension between what is and what should be. You rest in what eternally is. The end of personal responsibility here is perhaps the most liberating realization. When you truly believe it is finished, you discover that the weight of your spiritual life is not on your shoulders. You are not responsible for making spiritual truth come into being. You are not the creator of your own wholeness. Many students of truth exhaust themselves trying to hold the right thoughts, affirm the right statements, visualize the right outcomes. They believe their mental work is creating their reality, but this is still a form of personal effort, and it always leads to exhaustion. The truth is simpler and more restful. Your spiritual perfection does not depend on your thoughts, your efforts, your understanding, or your worthiness. It depends only on what God has already established, and God's work is finished. Your part is not to create but to recognize, not to achieve but to accept, not to become but to be. The practice of release. So what is the practical application? How do we live from this truth? It begins with a practice of release. When a problem presents itself, whether it appears as lack, disease, conflict, or fear, you do not immediately rush to fix it through mental work or affirmations. Instead, you pause. You become still. And in that stillness, you release the belief that something needs to be done. You remind yourself, it is finished. The spiritual reality is already complete. I need not heal this, correct this, or improve this. I need only to be still and know. And in that stillness, something remarkable happens. Not through your effort, but through your rest, the truth begins to reveal itself. Harmony appears where discord seemed to be. Supply flows where lack appeared. Health emerges where disease seemed present. These are not miracles in the sense of violations of natural law. They are simply the natural revelation of what has always been true behind the veil of appearances, the life of grace. Finally, when you truly believe it is finished, you enter into a life of grace. Grace is not something you earn or achieve. Grace is the recognition that everything has already been given. You live not by effort but by receptivity, not by working for God but by letting God work through you. This doesn't mean you stop all activity, but your activity changes in quality. It becomes effortless, natural, spontaneous. You find yourself doing what needs to be done, but without the strain of personal responsibility, without the fear of failure, without the burden of making things happen through your own power. You become transparent to the infinite, and through your transparency, the already finished work of spirit becomes visible in your experience. So I return to where we began. It is finished is not a statement about something that happened 2,000 years ago. It is a statement about the eternal nature of spiritual reality. Right now, in this moment, all of God's work is complete. Right now, your true spiritual identity is whole and perfect. Right now, infinite supply, infinite harmony, infinite life are present where you are. The power of spiritual completeness. Understanding that it is finished means divine work is already complete, not something we must achieve through effort or struggle. When we hear the words "it is finished," most of us immediately think of something that has ended, something completed in the past. We think of a task checked off a list, a project brought to conclusion, a chapter closed. But this understanding barely scratches the surface of what these three words truly mean in the spiritual sense. The great revelation hidden within this statement is that divine work, the work of infinite intelligence, the work of God is not something that was completed and is now done with. Rather, it exists in a state of eternal completion. This is difficult for the human mind to grasp because we live in a world of process, of becoming, of things that begin and end in time. We watch seeds grow into trees. We see buildings constructed brick by brick. We experience healing as a gradual process. Everything in our material experience speaks of incompleteness moving toward completion. But spiritual reality operates on an entirely different principle. In the realm of spirit, there is no incompleteness waiting to become complete. There is no imperfection gradually being perfected. There is no lack slowly being filled. The infinite intelligence that created the universe did not leave its work half-finished, waiting for us to complete it through our prayers, our thoughts, or our efforts. The divine creation is whole, perfect, and complete, not as something that once happened, but as an eternal state of being. This means that right now, in this very moment, your true spiritual nature is already perfect. Not becoming perfect, not moving toward perfection, but finished in its wholeness. The health you seek is not something you must create or attract or earn. It already exists as the truth of your spiritual being. The abundance you desire is not some way in your future, waiting to manifest. It already is in the finished work of divine provision. The peace you long for is not something you must achieve through years of meditation and discipline. It already exists at the center of your consciousness, complete and undisturbed. This understanding turns our entire approach to spirituality upside down. Instead of seeing ourselves as incomplete beings trying to become complete, we recognize ourselves as complete beings who have simply forgotten our completeness. Instead of praying for God to give us what we lack, we rest in the awareness that God has already given all. Instead of working to overcome problems and limitations, we learn to see through the illusion of incompleteness to the reality of wholeness that has always been present. The implications of this are staggering. It means you are not a work in progress. You are not broken and in need of fixing. You are not spiritually poor waiting to become rich. You are not disconnected from your source trying to find your way back. All of these beliefs come from the assumption that spiritual work is incomplete, that something remains to be done. But when you truly absorb the truth that it is finished, you realize that nothing needs to be added to you. Nothing needs to be healed in you. Nothing needs to be achieved by you. Your spiritual wholeness is not potential. It is actual. It is not promised. It is present. It is not conditional upon your worthiness, your understanding, or your efforts. It simply is, has always been, and will always be, because the divine work of creation is complete, perfect, and eternal. This is not a philosophical concept to be debated. This is a living truth to be experienced, to be rested in, to be lived from. And when you make this shift from seeking completeness to recognizing completeness, everything in your experience begins to transform. Sending the seeking mind, moving from constant striving and searching to resting in the realized truth of spiritual wholeness. The human mind is a magnificent instrument, but it has one fundamental flaw. It believes its purpose is to seek. From the moment we awaken in the morning until we fall asleep at night, the mind is constantly searching for answers, searching for solutions, searching for peace, searching for God, searching for truth. This endless seeking becomes so habitual that we mistake it for spiritual practice itself. We believe that a good spiritual life is one in which we are always searching, always striving, always moving towards some higher state of consciousness. But here is the paradox. The very act of seeking implies that something is missing. Every time you seek, you are unconsciously affirming that you do not have what you are looking for. Every prayer that asks for something reinforces the belief in its absence. Every effort to attain spiritual truth confirms your sense of separation from it. The seeking mind, no matter how sincere, how dedicated, how disciplined, actually perpetuates the very sense of incompleteness it is trying to overcome. This is why so many spiritual seekers spend decades on the path, and yet find themselves still searching, still incomplete, still feeling that something essential is missing. They move from teacher to teacher, from practice to practice, from book to book, always hoping that the next one will finally give them what they have been seeking. And occasionally they have moments of peace, glimpses of truth, experiences of transcendence. But then these fade, and the seeking begins again. The reason for this endless cycle is simple. They have not yet transcended the seeking mind itself. They are still operating from the fundamental assumption that they must find something they do not yet have, reach some, where they have not yet arrived, become someone they are not yet being. But when you truly believe that it is finished, something radical happens to this whole pattern. The seeking stops. Not because you have found what you were looking for, but because you realize there was never anything to find. Not because you have arrived somewhere, but because you recognize you were never separate from your destination. Not because you have become someone new, but because you awaken to who you have always been. This is not the exhausted giving up of a defeated seeker. This is the profound rest that comes from seeing through the illusion of seeking itself. You stop looking for God because you realize God is not lost. You stop searching for peace because you discover that peace is the very ground of your being. You stop trying to attain spiritual wholeness because you recognize that wholeness is your nature, not your goal. In this state, the mind becomes quiet, not through effort, but through understanding. When you are no longer seeking, there is nothing for the mind to do. Its constant activity was always in service of the search. Remove the search, and the activity naturally subsides. What remains is a state of simple presence of being here now, without agenda, without goal, without the need for anything to be different than it is. This does not mean you become passive or indifferent to life. Quite the opposite. When the seeking mind is transcended, you become fully present to what is actually here. You stop living in the future, in the someday when I finally attain mentality, and you begin to live in the eternal now. And it is only in this present moment that the finished work of spirit can be experienced and known. The greatest spiritual teachers throughout history have all pointed to this same truth. Seek and you will not find, but stop seeking and you discover what has been present. Be still and know. Not be active and achieve, not be diligent and attain, but be still. Cease the seeking. And in that stillness know the truth that has always been, that will always be, that simply is complete, whole, and finished. Living from presence, not promise. Shifting from living in anticipation of future salvation to abiding in the eternal now where all is already accomplished. Most of humanity lives in a strange relationship with time. We spend our days caught between two mental states, dwelling on what happened yesterday or anticipating what might happen tomorrow. We replay past events wishing we could change them. Or we project into the future, hoping for better circumstances to arrive. And in this constant movement, between past and future, we miss the only time in which we actually exist, the present moment, the eternal now. This temporal way of living becomes especially problematic in spiritual matters. We look at our current circumstances and see lack, limitation, discord, or disease. And because these conditions exist now, we naturally assume they must be corrected in the future. We pray for healing to come. We affirm abundance that will arrive. We work toward peace that we hope to eventually achieve. Our entire spiritual orientation becomes fixated on a promise, the promise that tomorrow will be better than today, that eventually we will overcome our present difficulties and enter into a state of harmony and wholeness. But living from promise rather than presence keeps us perpetually incomplete. No matter how much we achieve or overcome, there is always something more to attain, always some future condition we have not yet reached. We become like someone forever chasing the horizon. No matter how far we walk, it remains the same distance away. This is not because we are failing in our spiritual practice, but because we have fundamentally misunderstood the nature of spiritual reality. When you truly believe that it is finished, your entire relationship with time transforms. You realize that spiritual wholeness is not something that exists in the future waiting for you to finally reach it. It exists right now in this present moment as an eternal reality. The completion of divine work is not an event that happened in the past or a condition that will manifest in the future. It is the ever-present truth of what is here and now. This shift from living in time to living in presence is one of the most liberating transitions a human being can make. Suddenly, you are no longer waiting for your good to arrive. You are not postponing your peace until circumstances change. You are not projecting your wholeness into some distant tomorrow when you will finally have evolved enough, or learned enough, or overcome enough to deserve it. Instead, you discover that everything you have been waiting for is already present, hidden perhaps from your awareness, but present nonetheless. The kingdom of heaven is not coming someday, it is within you now. The supply you need is not on its way, it is already provided. The healing you seek is not a future event, it is the present reality of your spiritual being. This does not mean that change stops occurring in the visible. Circumstances still shift, situations still evolve, and what we call progress still happens. But your inner state is no longer dependent on these temporal changes. You are no longer living from the anxiety of will my good arrive, or the frustration of why hasn't it happened yet. You rest in the awareness that in the spiritual now all is already complete. Time becomes your servant rather than your master. You use it to move through the material world. But you are no longer enslaved by it. You can make plans for tomorrow without living in tomorrow. You can remember yesterday without being imprisoned by yesterday. And most importantly, you can be fully present to this moment, knowing that this moment right now contains all the wholeness, all the peace, all the abundance that you have been seeking. The promise becomes presence. The future becomes now. And in that eternal now, you discover what has always been true, but what you could never see while you were living in time. It is finished, complete, whole, and perfect. In this very moment, the illusion of separation dissolved. Recognizing that belief in it is finished reveals the unreality of separation from infinite supply, health, and harmony. From the moment we gain self-awareness as human beings, we live with a deep, often unconscious sense of separation. We feel separate from other people, separate from nature, separate from the source of our good, and most fundamentally separate from God or infinite intelligence. This sense of separation is so pervasive, so woven into the fabric of our daily experience that we rarely question it. We simply accept it as the basic reality of existence. This belief in separation creates every problem we experience. When we feel separate from the source of supply, we experience lack and limitation. When we feel separate from the source of health, we experience disease and weakness. When we feel separate from the source of harmony, we experience conflict and discord. When we feel separate from the source of life itself, we experience fear and death. All suffering at its root traces back to this fundamental illusion that we are isolated beings cut off from the infinite, dependent on external conditions for our well-being. We spend our lives trying to bridge this perceived gap. We work hard to acquire things from outside ourselves. We seek validation and love from other people. We pray to a God we imagine is somewhere else, asking this distant deity to send us what we need. We study spiritual truth, hoping to eventually close the distance between where we are and where God is. Everything we do is colored by this underlying assumption of separation. But when you truly believe that it is finished, this entire structure of separation collapses. You begin to realize that the gap you have been trying to bridge never actually existed. You were never separate from infinite supply, because infinite supply is the very substance of your being. You were never separate from perfect health, because the life that flows through you is divine life, whole and complete. You were never separate from harmony, because the consciousness in which you live and move and have your being is infinite harmony itself. The finished work of spirit means that wholeness is not something external to you that you must somehow obtain. It is not somewhere else waiting for you to find it or attract it or earn it. It is the very nature of what you are. The infinite did not create you and then step back, leaving you to fend for yourself in a world of limitation. The infinite is not separate from its creation. Where you are infinite intelligence is what you are at the deepest level, is the expression of infinite wholeness. This realization changes everything. You stop looking outside yourself for your good. You stop begging external sources for what you need. You stop waiting for conditions to change before you can experience peace. Instead, you turn within to the infinite source that has never been absent, that has never withheld anything, that is forever complete in its provision. This is not mere philosophy or comforting belief. This is a profound shift in consciousness that has practical, tangible effects in your daily experience. When you stop living from the consciousness of separation, when you rest in the awareness that you are inseparable, ably one with infinite supply, infinite wisdom, infinite life, then the evidence of that oneness begins to appear in your experience. Not because you have created it, not because you have attracted it, but because you have stopped blocking it with the belief in separation. The illusion dissolves not through effort, but through recognition. You do not have to work to become one with your source. You already are one. You do not have to earn your place in divine wholeness. You have never left it. The separation was never real. It was always only a belief, a misperception, a dream from which you are now awakening. And in that awakening, you discover the truth that has always been. It is finished, whole, and you are forever one with that wholeness. Silent listening over mental effort, discovering that true belief comes through inner stillness and receptivity, rather than through mental affirmations or forceful thought. Throughout human history, we have been taught that achievement requires effort. We learn from childhood that if we want something, we must work for it, strive for it, fight for it. This principle seems to govern every aspect of material life, and so naturally, we assume it must also govern spiritual life. We approach our spiritual practice with the same mentality we bring to worldly accomplishments, through mental effort, through forceful thinking, through determined concentration. We wake up in the morning and immediately begin our mental work. We affirm what we want to be true. We deny what appears to be false. We visualize desired outcomes. We repeat mantras and positive statements. We concentrate intensely on holding the right thoughts, believing that if we can just maintain the correct mental state long enough, if we can just think powerfully enough, then the spiritual reality we seek will manifest in our experience. And when it doesn't happen as as we hoped, we assume we simply haven't worked hard enough. So we redouble our efforts, affirm more vigorously, concentrate more intensely, and exhaust ourselves in the process. But here is a truth that contradicts everything the world has taught us. Spiritual realization does not come through mental effort. It comes through release. It comes through letting go. It comes through silent, receptive listening rather than forceful, active thinking. When you truly believe that it is finished, you realize that there is nothing for you to mentally create or produce. The work is already complete. Your mind does not need to make something happen. Your thoughts do not need to cause spiritual reality to come into existence. Your affirmations do not create truth. They can only recognize truth that already is. This understanding completely transforms the nature of spiritual practice. Instead of approaching your inner work as a task to be accomplished through mental labor, you approach it as a state of receptivity to be entered. You become still. You become quiet. You release all effort, all striving, all attempting. And in that stillness, in that silence, something remarkable happens. The still, small voice can finally be heard. The presence that has always been there but was drowned out by the noise of your mental activity becomes apparent. The wholeness that exists beneath all your thoughts about lack and limitation rises into awareness. Not because you created it through your mental work, but because you finally stopped creating static with your mental activity. This is what true prayer looks like. Not petition, but listening. Not speaking to God, but allowing God to speak through the silence of your being. Not directing infinite intelligence with your thoughts, but opening yourself to be directed by it. Not using your mind to produce results, but quieting your mind so that what is already finished can reveal itself. The great spiritual masters have always known this. They have spoken of meditation, of contemplation, of the practice of presence. But often we misunderstand even these teachings, turning them into another form of mental work, another technique to master, another effort to make. We try to meditate our way to enlightenment, concentrate our way to realization, visualize our way to wholeness. But genuine spiritual practice is not doing, it is being. It is not effort, it is rest. It is not thinking correct thoughts. It is moving beyond thought altogether into the direct experience of what is. When you sit in silence, when you release all mental striving, when you simply listen with no agenda, no goal, no attempt to make something happen, then the finished work of spirit becomes apparent to you, not as something you achieved, but as something you finally allowed yourself to experience. Not as the result of your mental power, but as the revelation that comes when mental activity ceases and pure awareness remains. This is the great reversal. Strength comes through surrender, knowing comes through not knowing, and spiritual realization comes not through the noise of mental effort, but through the power of silent listening. And so we return to where we began, but now with eyes opened to see what was always present. It is finished. 3 words. Yet in these 3 words lies the entire secret of spiritual liberation. Not a secret hidden from you, but a secret hidden within you, waiting only for your recognition. You have sought for so long. You have worked so hard. You have prayed so earnestly. You have struggled so valiantly to become what you already are, to obtain what you already have, to reach where you have never left. And perhaps now, in this moment, you can finally rest from all that seeking, all that striving, all that endless fought to complete what is already complete. The divine work is finished, not your work. You were never meant to finish what only infinite intelligence could accomplish. But God's work, the work of creation itself, stands complete, perfect and whole in this eternal now. Your health is finished. Your abundance is finished. Your peace is finished. Your wholeness is finished. Not as future promises, but as present realities existing right now in the spiritual truth of your being. What remains is not for you to create this reality, but simply to accept it, not to achieve it, but to acknowledge it, not to become it, but to be it. When you leave this moment, you will return to a world that constantly testifies to incompleteness. You will see lack, limitation, disease, and discord. The material senses will present their evidence, and that evidence will seem very real, very solid, very convincing. And in those moments you will have a choice. You can return to the old way, the way of seeking, striving, working to fix what appears broken and supply what appears missing. Or you can remember these words, "It is finished." You can become still. You can release the burden of personal effort. You can listen in the silence for the truth that transcends all appearances. And in that listening, in that stillness, in that sacred receptivity, the finished work will reveal itself in your experience. Not because you made it happen, but because you finally stopped preventing it. Not because you were worthy, but because wholeness knows no unworthiness. Not because you understood, but because truth needs no understanding to be true. This is not the end of your spiritual journey. This is the beginning of living from an entirely different foundation. Not from the consciousness of lack-seeking fulfillment, but from the consciousness of completeness expressing itself. Not from separation seeking reunion, but from unity recognizing itself. Not from time seeking eternity, but from eternity playing in time. So, take this truth with you. Let it sink deep into your consciousness. Let it dissolve the burden you have carried for so long, the burden of trying to complete yourself, perfect yourself, save yourself. You need not carry that weight another moment. It is finished. Rest in that, live from that, be that, and watch as the life you have always sought begins to live itself through you, effortlessly, naturally, spontaneously, not as something you achieved, but as something you finally allowed. Go now in peace. Not the peace you must create, but the peace that already is. Not the peace of tomorrow's promise, but the peace of this moment's presence. Not the peace of personal accomplishment, but the peace of divine completion. It is finished. It has always been finished. And you are forever held in that finished perfection now and always. Be still and